Today on Variant, we talk about everyone's favorite Sith Lord, Darth Vader. Welcome to Variant, where we love comics more than I'm excited that Christmas is right around the corner. I'm your host, Arris. Everyone knows that Darth Vader is one of the most popular characters that the Star Wars franchise has to offer, if not the most popular character. Either way, he's the most recognizable and well-known Sith Lord. I know he's definitely my favorite, followed by Darth Maul. But anyway, with Vader making his triumphant return in Rogue One, there is no better time to talk about this beast of a character. Can you tell I'm just a little bit excited to talk about him? Before I get started, I just want to let you guys know two things right off the bat. First, I'm only going to be covering the pieces of his history that are in Star Wars canon, so I will not be touching on any of the Star Wars Legends stuff. If you guys are wondering what's considered Star Wars canon, that would be all 7 Star Wars movies, well, 8 if you include Rogue One, but it hasn't been released at the time of me shooting this episode. Also in canon are the Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels cartoon series, and of course any Marvel Star Wars themed comics released after April 25th, 2014. In fact, pretty much any movie, cartoon, book, game, or comic released after April 25th, 2014 is in canon, as that's when Disney/Lucasfilm revised the franchise to ensure a flowing timeline with the new sequel trilogy. If you want a more in-depth explanation of the Star Wars timeline and canon, be sure to check out our Star Wars Continuity and Timeline Explained and History of Star Wars episodes. I put a link for those in the corner up here, so click away, my friends. The second thing I wanted to mention is that Vader's history is pretty elaborate. So as always, this episode comes with a disclaimer that I'm not going to be able to mention every single detail of Vader's history, but I am going to try to touch on all the most important pieces. With all that out of the way, let's jump into it, my friends. Darth Vader's original identity is Anakin Skywalker. Anakin was considered to be the chosen one of the Force, meaning he was supposed to destroy the Sith and restore balance to the Force. It all started when Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn came to the planet Tatooine and found a young Anakin as a child slave. Even at a young age, Anakin had great piloting skills, something he demonstrated during a pod race in The Phantom Menace. He was also a great mechanic and was actually the one who built C-3PO for his mother. Long story short, Qui-Gon took Anakin to the Jedi High Council on Coruscant and asked for him to be trained as a Jedi, as Qui-Gon believed for him to be the chosen one. But the High Council was all like, nah bro, he's too old. But Master Yoda also tells Anakin that he sensed much fear in him, which leads to the dark side. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but you all get the point. Fast forward, Qui-Gon Jinn is eventually killed by Darth Maul. Don't worry, Obi-Wan avenged him by slicing Maul in half. But after Qui-Gon's death, Yoda grants Obi-Wan the status of Jedi Knight. After which, Obi-Wan tells the Council that he wants to make Anakin his Padawan to fulfill his promise to Qui-Gon. Despite Grand Master Yoda being hesitant, the High Council agreed to it, and Obi-Wan took Anakin under his wing. Years later, Anakin would return to Tatooine in order to save his mother, who he left as a child when Qui-Gon took him to be trained as a Jedi. However, upon his return, he discovers that she was taken by the Sand People. He finds her at their camp, and when he does, she dies in his arms. This, of course, filled him with hate, anger, and grief, all things Jedis aren't supposed to feel or act on. But Anakin, filled with rage, killed the entire village full of Sand People, including the women and children. An extremely dark and vicious act that marked another sign of his inevitable turn to the dark side. But it wouldn't be the last. Anakin had 2 confrontations with Count Dooku, the first of which cost Anakin his right hand. But the second time around, Anakin overpowered Dooku and returned the favor by cutting off both of Dooku's hands. He was going to leave it at that, or so it seemed, but Chancellor Palpatine convinced him to cut off his head, killing a defenseless Dooku. Yet another red flag that Anakin was falling to the dark side. Then jumping to the straw that broke the camel's back, Skywalker discovers that Palpatine was the Sith Lord Darth Sidious that they'd been hunting, and he turns him over to the Jedi Council. But when Mace Windu was about to kill the Sith Lord, declaring him too dangerous to be left alive because of his control over the Senate and courts, Anakin stepped in and chopped off Windu's hand just as he was about to deliver a fatal blow with his lightsaber. This allowed Darth Sidious to use Force Lightning to throw Master Windu off a building. Anakin then told Sidious that he would do whatever he asked and pledged himself to his teachings as long as he would help him save Padme's life, as Anakin feared for her life due to a series of nightmares he was having. It was at this moment that Anakin fully became a Sith, with Sidious officially saying, henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader. After turning to the dark side and leading a slaughter of the Jedi, including the younglings at the Jedi Temple, Anakin, now Darth Vader, is confronted by his former friend, teacher, and Jedi Master Obi-Wan on the planet Mustafar. During the fight, Obi-Wan gains the higher ground on Anakin and pleads with him to stop. But of course he doesn't and attempts to attack at an extreme disadvantage, forcing Obi-Wan to strike, chopping off both his legs and one of his arms in the process. Saddened but fully realizing that Anakin has now completely turned to the dark side, Obi-Wan leaves his former Jedi brother there helpless, and soon the lava from the planet sets Anakin on fire, horribly disfiguring his whole body. Darth Sidious found Anakin on planet Mustafar just in time and rescued him by giving him robotic limbs and his iconic armor, which was made to protect Vader's charred body and provide life support systems, as well as provide an air of intimidation. Now, most of what I just covered is in Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, which is the last of the prequel trilogies. But the next time we see Vader, in chronological order that is in Star Wars Rebels, which takes place 14 years after the Clone Wars conclude and 5 years before Episode 4, A New Hope. Also, here's a spoiler alert for Star Wars Rebels. So for those of you who haven't seen the TV show and you don't want any spoilers, here's your warning. In this series, Vader leads a Force-sensitive group known as the Imperial Inquisitors. Their job is to search and kill any and all remaining Force-sensitive children and Jedi. At the end of the first season, Vader learned that his former Padawan, Ahsoka, had joined the Rebel Alliance, and the Emperor orders him to find her. In the second season, Ahsoka had a vision where Anakin blames her for letting him turn to the dark side. Season 2 basically builds all the way up to the final episodes where Ahsoka fights her former master inside a Sith temple, which bought time for her friends to escape the temple. We then see the temple explode and Vader walk out of the ruins with no sign of Ahsoka. As a side note, Star Wars Rebel creator and producer Dave Filoni said when asked if Vader would appear in Season 3, "You know, I've kind of gone on this course, which is pretty direct about certain things, because I don't like to tease people along and then have them be disappointed. So it's really an elected decision to not have Vader around because, as we get closer to A New Hope, I want him to serve as that story." So it seems that the next piece of his story, chronologically that is, will remain Episode 4, A New Hope. Which of course is actually the story that first introduced us to Darth Vader and the Star Wars universe in general, with the movie's release in 1977. In A New Hope, we see that the Alliance won its first major victory against the Empire by stealing the Death Star's blueprints. An event that Rogue One is finally going to detail and show how the Rebels stole said plans. Also returning Vader to the big screen, which I cannot wait to see. Anyway, fearful that the Rebels would find a weakness in the Death Star with the stolen readouts, Vader was sent to recover the plans and locate the secret Rebel base of operations. Of course, we know that he doesn't succeed, and Luke ended up firing a kill shot that destroys the Death Star at the end of the movie. Then we have the 25-issue Marvel Darth Vader comic that is set between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. I actually got the chance to chat with writer Kieran Gillen at San Diego Comic-Con back in July. So rather than just tell you about the comic, I figured I'd let the writer tell you about the series instead.
Darth Vader is set between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. It's basically the story of, at the end of if you've watched the movies, and you probably have, at the end of A New Hope, Vader is the sole survivor of the biggest military disaster of all time. Literally, that's the Emperor's plan for 20 years to build this thing and take over the universe with it. That's literally the plan, and they've blown up. That's catastrophic. At the start of Empire, he is much more powerful than he ever was in A New Hope. He's got the Starfleet, he's just killing people randomly, he's like on a whole new level. There's an implied story between the two. Like, this is basically the fall and rise of Darth Vader. I always reference House of Cards. So it's a man who is powerful, who feels slighted, and now turns to tactics he would not have normally done before to regain his power and exceed it. At the same time, of course, the other thing in the book is, between the two movies, Darth Vader realises he has a son. And that was like... That's implicit in the movies. In the story, we get to find the moment when Darth has that moment, and he's realised the last 20 years of his life has been a complete lie. So that's what the book is. It's basically Darth's adventure to try to A, start hunting down Luke, B, regain his power. And we're kind of reaching the end of that, which is, it was always an idea of a story. It was not really going to ever be ongoing eternally. This was going to be a book which... builds towards conclusion, then stops, and that's kind of what we do. Like, I'm really incredibly proud of the last couple of issues.
Cool stuff, right? If you're a Star Wars fan, you definitely want to read the Darth Vader comic. Trust me, you will not be disappointed. But this brings us to the events of The Empire Strikes Back. A lot happens in this movie, and it's widely known as the fan favorite out of the bunch, but the most notable thing to happen, with Vader at least, is the big reveal where he tells Luke those 4 famous words, "I am your father." It's easily one of the most iconic lines in all of cinema history, and one of the best Star Wars moments in general. Speaking of best Star Wars moments, you can check out our top 5 here. But now let's jump ahead to Return of the Jedi, where Vader faces and fights his son for the last time. In their final confrontation, which is awesome by the way, Luke manages to overpower his father and cuts off his hand, returning the favor as Vader cut off his hand in Empire Strikes Back. As you may have noticed, there's a whole heck of a lot of chopping off of hands in the Star Wars franchise, but it is what it is. The Emperor then tells Luke to kill Vader and take his father's place at his side, but Luke's all like, "That's okay, I'm gonna stay on the light side of the Force." So the Emperor attacks Luke with Force lightning and nearly kills him, but the good left in Vader comes out and he saves his son by throwing the Emperor into the Death Star's reactor core, killing him. Luke then tries to save his injured father, but Vader tells him to stop and asks him to take off his mask, so that he can look at Luke with his own eyes. Anakin then gives his son a smile and tells him a few kind words before dying in Luke's arms. Luke then escapes the Death Star with his father's body and ceremonially burns his body. Anakin's selfless sacrifice allowed his spirit to be preserved in the Force, alongside Yoda and Obi-Wan. All of this brings us to The Force Awakens, where we see that Kylo Ren, the son of Han Solo and Princess Leia, has turned to the dark side and somehow got his hands on the remains of his grandfather's helmet, aspiring to finish what Vader started. We'll see how he intends to walk in Vader's footsteps next December in Episode 8. But that, my friends, is my summary of Darth Vader's history. Again, I know I left out certain things, like Anakin's relationship and secret marriage to Padme, but I said that would be the case at the beginning of this episode. It would be hard to fit in everything, but as always, I try to give you guys a solid overview of his history. Before we close out, let's briefly talk about powers and then end with some reading recommendations. Vader is a master of multiple techniques with his lightsaber. He also has telekinesis, meaning he can lift and move objects to his will, which is shown in the Star Wars title when he tears apart an Imperial walker using the Force. Speaking of the Force, Vader is extremely skilled in the use of the Force and is almost able to do anything utilizing it, like his iconic Force choke. He also has Force repulse, where Vader would concentrate on the Force and violently push it outwards. Then he has Force crush, which, you guessed it, he can crush things using the Force. Force rage, where Vader would channel his anger to increase his own speed, strength, and ferocity. Force kill, which was used to telekinetically destroy a victim's organs. Talk about a brutal way to kill someone. Vader can also throw his lightsaber in a boomerang fashion, with it cutting its way through obstacles and returning back to his hand. Through the power of the Force, he has accelerated healing, along with precognition, telepathy, energy absorption, and mind control. Really, that's just the tip of the iceberg, friends, but I think you guys get the point. Now let me give you all some Darth Vader reading recommendations. Read the Star Wars title, volumes 1 through 3, all 25 issues of the Darth Vader comic, and if you haven't already, be sure to watch the Star Wars Rebels cartoon along with episodes 1 through 7 of the Star Wars movies. And of course, watch the new Rogue One movie, which puts Vader back on the big screen for the first time since his brief appearance in Revenge of the Sith. First up for Wednesday, December 8th, we have Suicide Squad issue 8. All you really need to know is Harley Quinn goes insane in this issue. Now we have Batgirl and the Birds of Prey issue 5. The new Oracle has led the Birds of Prey all around Gotham City, forcing them to deal with the worst of what the city has to offer. And finally, we have Spider-Man issue 10. The events of Civil War II have made Miles a target, and it will change the way the Marvel Universe looks at Spider-Man forever. And that will bring another episode of Variant to a close. But remember, you can always like our Variant Facebook page to keep up with the show and all things comic related. You can also follow Variant on Twitter at Variant Comics or me on Twitter at Arris_Quinones. But I'll see you guys next week when we talk about all things comics. An event that Rogue One is finally going to detail and show how the rebels stole the said plans. This is my sexy dance. This is my sexy Star Wars dance.
It's a sexy dance.
It's a sexy dance.
There's a lot of hip movement.
Yeah, I'm Spanish. That's what it's all about.